Sorry, give me just a second to get things set up here. Make sure I don't get anybody jumping into the meeting here. Don't know who'd want to, but just lock it up so we don't have anybody jumping in. And by meeting, I mean, hey, welcome. This is week 2 of Accounting 255 after spring break. And I'm going to go through some HR and Osha things today, and 2 assignments for the week, and I'll show you all the details there. So we'll just go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen, go directly over to that one, and pray things go smoothly for me and for you guys. Hopefully you're staying healthy and happy, not going too stir crazy, and just enjoying being able to have a little bit of time to ourselves. I know some of this is tough for some, and hope and pray that things are going well for each one of you. So again, HR and Osha. So just want to spend some time. Okay, so apparently that's not going to work. Okay, so we will keep going, but we'll do it in this method. So HR. So certainly from one standpoint, this, human resources are part of what we talk about when we think about the essential resources within a company, right? The people who operate an organization, they staff it, they run things. Sure, we might in some cases have things automated, but that doesn't take away the need for individuals to be a part of what's going on, right? Making decisions, the money aspect of things, right? We've got to have checks and balances on those kind of things, and you can't just run a business all with electronics, with robots, or whatever else you might think of that way. Although who knows down the road, things wouldn't surprise me, I guess. And human resources is also the function within an organization that deals with a lot of different things as it relates to the people that staff an organization, right? Everything from the hiring and firing, compensation and benefits, being able to bring people in as part of the hiring process, what they call onboarding, right? The performance management, how are people doing? How are they performing against expectations? Training, organizational development, the culture that goes with it is to some extent determined or at least helped by human resources. And then, the release of employees, meaning, potential firing. Part of many of these things are related, and I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about how these things work out in the real world to one degree or another. Some of my experiences from Western as well. Certainly as we think about, I'm just going to go through the list here of what you see on the screen. So as we start with compensation and benefits, you think about, what are we going to pay people from a salary or an hourly wage, and then beyond that, what do we provide for other, types of benefits? There could be bonuses. There might be insurance, health, dental, vision, life. You can think of lots of different things, and in some organizations, depending on what they are, you might think about things about related to disability, or even, well, I mentioned life insurance, but death, right? And some businesses will do that. Again, it depends a little bit on the type of business. Some of the other benefits that could be out there related to retirement packages, and just the ability to move around. Maybe you've got a business that will allow you, maybe they'll help pay for your schooling. So all of those kind of things are possible. So, when we think about hiring employees, we think about what we're going to talk to potential employees about. We're talking about this entire compensation package, not just what we're going to pay them and what they'll see in their paycheck, but beyond that, what other kinds of benefits, because you might be out there in the workforce and the hourly wage or the salary is more or less the same. maybe it's within $1,000 or something like that. It's like, for all intents and purposes, it's, it's more or less the same, but are there other benefits that make the difference? What if I got a business that'll pay me $2,000 less than another company as I'm looking for a job, but the first company that pays me less money will pay for my master's degree. That's likely upwards of 40 grand over the course of a couple of years that they're paying me. It's not a bad investment to make. All of that, is related to the recruiting and hiring that we do. How do we recruit people? How do we advertise? How do we market? How do we get the word out there? How do we bring people in? Is this something that's completely in-house? Do we hire a firm that helps us to find some of the right people? We do that at Western from time to time. We've done that for the president. We're doing it currently for an external person, mainly related to fundraising and recruiting for the energy management program, right? So all of those kind of things are a part of this. And then that whole process of onboarding, right? How do we get people involved? All of the forms you've got to fill out, right? The I-9, the W-4, all of these things, if you're doing insurance, you got to fill out all those forms and one for each different type, right? Health, dental, vision, life, if nothing else with the life insurance, maybe the amount's already predetermined by the business, likely is, if they're paying for it, but what are they, who's your beneficiary? So filling out all of that stuff, right, can take time. You've got to bring in documents, and the HR department's got to deal with that. Sometimes, for Western, for example, we require official transcripts from universities where degrees were received. We need people to prove to us that they have a bachelor's, master's, PhD if appropriate, whatever that terminal or final degree might have been. So we have to, we're getting all that stuff in. And so, you can imagine that every employee's got a folder, right? And then even in the beginning, that folder is pretty thick of things that you've pulled in. Some, whether that's a thick physical folder or whether that's a digital folder somewhere that is, of course, backed up in the cloud. Maybe there's a second backup on site. Those are things that you just can't go missing, right? You can't lose them. And then we move on into, I'd kind of put training, maybe even before performance management. Hopefully we're doing some training before we're doing, seeing how people are actually doing, depending on the job, what kind of training do they need to help them be successful, right? Because that's our goal. I don't want to have to go out and hire somebody else and do this all over again. Reality is that happens, right? But that's not the goal to begin with. And then we can move on into, managing performance. How are people doing? What are they doing well? What could be improved? And just working on those kinds of things as well. We can help with organizational development, from the actual structure of the company, right? How things look, to the culture. If there are times when HR departments have to step in and even tell senior management to, chill out, or, you can't do that, or you can't say that, or, right, and helping to set that culture can be important, right? It's, it's not necessarily the little things. It's maybe not the overall culture, but it can stop some of the bad things, right, that we just, you can't have happening. And there's all sorts of advice, where we might go to HR and say, okay, we've got an employee, or we've got a situation, right, that we need help with. Need to make sure that we're doing things according to the laws of the land, whatever land that might be. Here in the U.S., there are all sorts of things related to this. Even in a place like Western, where we've got policy handbooks, we've got, and frankly, in the state of Colorado, which is what they call an at-will state, meaning that a company can get rid of an employee for any reason. An employee can leave for any reason. And yet, even with those kind of laws, you have to be careful. You have to document, right? Because there are still laws that are out there that protect employees from wrongful firing, right? Those kinds of things. And so even the release of employees, right, is important for us to be able to understand what's going on. that we've documented everything. If we've got poor behavior, right, whatever it is, how do we document that? As little things come and go. Part of that's part of performance management and how we deal with that. But at some point, if you're going to let somebody go, right, you've got to have the documentation in case that comes back in the form of a lawsuit, right? So that's kind of the gambit from beginning to end, as far as being able to first look for employees and then, to let them go, or maybe they leave on their own. But that's kind of that cycle that is never ending within human resources. And then dealing with everything else that's in there, related to taxes, and maybe there's a finance department that you work with to make sure that those things go well, and that we're paying people what they're supposed to be paid, that we're taking out the right amount of taxes and portions of health insurance, or whatever it might be, right? That all of those things are perfect. Right now, mistakes are made. Right, that happens, but perfection as much as humanly possible. Spend a few minutes here talking about OSHA, right? OSHA is the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, right? These are rules and regulations, laws, policies around making sure that people in the workplace are safe, right? And some of this is very industry specific, right? So I'm going to come up here and start a new share and come over to this particular screen, right? As we look at, you look at all of these different parts, right? And each one of these is by standard. I can come over here and do it by industry in this tab, but if we look at this by, gear certification, or so let's go look at construction for just a moment. And as you can imagine, right, this is pretty big, right? This is really big, and this is all just a portion of what's going on. Just looking over there to see how close I am to the bottom, right? But all of this, everything from scuba diving as you're doing construction, can you imagine, right? Because there are times when you've got underwater welding that has to take place, right? Just as an example, right? You've got tools, mechanical equipment, you've got manual removal of floors and storage, chutes, right? To sense if you're up top and you're taking something apart and you're sending stuff down to the bottom, what does that have to look like? Beams and columns, right? All sorts of steel erection in that case. Motor vehicles, site clearing, helicopters. It's like, what? Right? A whole bunch of reserved things for when things change over time, I think. Welding, fire prevention, signaling, right? You can imagine you got people out, you're doing stuff, and this could be for road construction, right? You see those people out there all the time, the signs, slow down. They're wearing colored, right? Obviously colored shirts, or whatever you might call those, right? That you slip over the top. But just something that's kind of a jacket type thing that shows that something's coming up and that you've got to pay attention, maybe even a little more than usual, right? So all sorts of things in here, right? And depending on the kind of business that you're in, you've got to know all of this, right? Because if somebody gets hurt or dies, heaven forbid, working in your business, if you're found to be liable, that you didn't have safe procedures and all that kind of stuff in place, that you're not meeting these OSHA laws and regulations, you could be very liable, for losing thousands, millions of dollars to this, to, essentially having to close your doors and go out of business, right, over things like this. It's another reason why we have things in place, like we talked about very early on in the semester, around the type of business that we are, right? LLC, corporation, right? Trying to diffuse our liability should some of these kinds of things happen, to be the challenge of the business and not the challenge of the individual, right? And so those kind of things become challenging over time. If you've been around and worked at all in different places, you've seen, likely you're supposed to have seen, right, OSHA posters that talk about, if you're in with chemicals, you're in with other things like that, even up to food safety and things like that, right? That you're taking care of things. You understand what you're supposed to do. You understand what you're supposed to do if something isn't right. Um, and then even after you've talked with a boss that things still aren't right, what's your next recourse, and all of those kind of things are all a part of this, right? So um, there's so many of these, right? And I just clicked on the one related to construction, right? And then you saw how long that list was. If you're not using helicopters, and you can kind of ignore that one, but there are other things in here that you might have to take a peek at over time, and especially if things change or when things change, because they always do, right? So as you think about these two topics, I'd like you to do a couple things. And so I'm going to go back and share back to this PowerPoint. And I'll apologize if things kind of seem to stop and scroll back and then move forward again. I noticed that Zoom was doing that a little bit. But here are the assignments for this week. And these are all due, as you see down here at the bottom, on Sunday, turned in Blackboard. There'll be two separate assignments listed, one HR, one OSHA. Again, they're due Sunday at just shy of midnight. So for the HR assignment, so you have an employee, for example, who's not meeting your expectations and in fact has been missing work and treating other employees poorly. So what steps would you go through, or should you go through, to let this person go, or to fire them? So you can use a combination of bullets and text. This one should be about a page long. Certainly not too shy. Don't make a big heading at the top, right? Don't scrunch the margins in. Don't use huge text, right? Use normal stuff like you would in a paper for both of these assignments. On the OSHA side, using the OSHA.gov website, right? Learn what it means to be a whistleblower and how someone in this position would go about making a complaint, right? There's a whole section in the OSHA website about whistleblowers. Think about in your minds a specific industry and think about something that somebody might complain about. What is the procedure for filling out the complaint with OSHA? What protections are in place for this whistleblower, right? Because there are, if you're going to go in and you're going to take the risk of tattling to the federal government, I won't call it tattling. If you're sharing information with the federal government about an unsafe work condition, you should have some insurances that you can keep employment, right? For example, right? This is one of the basics, right? And then what should the person filling out the complaint expect during the investigation? Okay. This one should be pretty much all text over 1.5 pages, right? As always, if you have questions, let me know. My email is always open. You can do a Zoom call with you too, if you prefer. But again, these are all due by Sunday at just shy of midnight, and I'll give some other resources and things like that over the course of the week for you to take a peek at. So, all right, have a good day.